Hello, this is LibertyReAwaken with YouTube video number 7. Today I'm going to talk about some basic economic principles that are important for people to understand as they interact with their own personal finances and how the government spends money. So a common thing that I hear is that people anti-Semitism, and one of the things driving anti-Semitism is they say, oh well, they move into the neighborhood and they steal all the money, and they're making the rest of the country poor because they're stealing all the money, and how misinformed of an opinion that is to have of Jewish people. And so the stereotypical Jewish person is very conniving with money, and very spendthrift, and isn't very generous. And so I'm not sure where that exactly came from, but I'm going to take a stab at it, and I think it's because they used to, for the Roman Empire, when Catholicism was first developing, and so then there's religions were developing throughout their region, and one of the first groups that started to support their tax system, their tax collection, is the Jewish people, because they were sort of ostracized to begin with, and so then they could identify that group to be their tax collectors. Because Romans, the way they used to do tax collection was that they had to bring in so much money every year, and they would hire these tax agents to go collect money. So then those tax agents could go collect as much money as they possibly could, and they had to turn in so much of it to the government, and then whatever the difference was that they could keep for themselves. So and Jewish people were the first group to that the Romans could rely on for that. So I think that kind of started the impression that Jewish people are, conniving and coming for your money. And then of course there was the Rothschild family, which is the most wealthy family in history. I think it's hard to collect data on that, but there was the first Rothschild in Europe, and so he started a bank, and the bank was successful, and then with his family members he installed them to other countries. So you'd go install the bank in France, and then that'd be the Rothschild Bank in France, and there was Spain, the Rothschild Bank in Spain, and each of those were very successful because the father taught his family members how to run a successful bank, and so then he spread throughout Europe, and then the Rothschild family fortune just grew because all the banks were successful, they were all related, and that's why the Rothschild name is what it is today. If you don't know of that family yet, then you keep an ear out. You'll hear Rothschild things about galas and mansions and wealth. You'll start to recognize that name as a wealthy Jewish family. So then that helps pivot the impression of Jewish people being well educated and then being in charge of money, that then they get a negative stereotype about them. And so but the Jewish people aren't like pirates. They're not going into an island in the Caribbean, stealing all the gold and then moving away. That's what would be stealing money from a city and making it poor. So but what Jewish people typically do is they go into a town, and their business that they're comfortable with will be jewelry. They're known for their diamonds, and then also for banking. And so what I want to focus on is banking and how beneficial that is to society. So the way money is created is through banking, whether it's through a business or on an interpersonal level. Because so let me start out with saying this, is that the amount of naturally occurring money is $0. So every dollar or money that has been created is because of human interaction and then building that trust in it. So just keep that in mind. There is no naturally occurring amount of wealth, and so every dollar that's out there has been created. So how does that dollar be created? Well, let me give you a quick rundown of that. So let's say I've got $10, and I'm happy with my family and my situation, so then I put that into my savings account. And so then the bank has the $10, and I've got $10 to my name, but then that bank has $10 that they're like, oh, well, if I have this in our funds, then I can loan it out to somebody else. So then somebody else borrows that $10. So then I've got $10, and now that new person has $10. So just $10 have just been created, and now that bank is responsible to both of us, because they can earn interest on that person that's borrowing the money, and then that person will pay back $11. And so then the bank is generating that money, but they still only owe us 10. So then that's $1 net profit for the bank, and then the person who borrowed the money could start their business and start to do their own borrowing and saving. And so that's why people say that there's a misconception that that putting your money in savings isn't doing anything, is hurting the economy, but that's actually wrong, because you should be earning money and saving it, and then some people have to make that investment. They have to borrow money to be able to make money. So they borrow a house, that way they can afford to live in a nice neighborhood and have a high paying job in the area, or they borrow money so that way they can make an investment in a drum of oil, which they buy from Saudi Arabia, and they can sell in South America for more. That's kind of a poor example that started to get away from me there, but just the idea of borrowing money and then making investing it and then making money back, and then that's the creation, is borrowing and saving money. And so if you know, like Fight Club is to get rid of the credit card companies because they've got everybody in debt. Well, debt is a good thing. That's how you build money in a society, and having that strength of the contract and knowing that that if somebody defaults on their loan, or you know, that there's the interest payment, and then to default on their loan is a big deal, because then you've just broken that contract, and that trust in society about borrowing money and returning it with interest is an important part of having a thriving economy. So that's why borrowing and saving money is both good. And the Fight Club explanation of, oh, well, everybody will be debt free if we just get rid of the credit card companies, that is really bad, because then it will destroy the trust in the currency and erode the whole system. And so let's take a closer look at money. And what is money, right? I said there's $0 naturally occurring money. And you say, well, what about gold? So gold has no value to it, just that humans said, oh, well, this is a scarce element, and so that you know, therefore it has value. So all humans across all countries decided that gold has value to it. So it has more value than a dollar, because the dollar could collapse, or the Russian ruble, or whatever the case may be. And then that currency isn't worth anything, and then people start buying a lot more gold because it's kind of like the universal thing. But both of those are sort of fiat currencies, where they don't really have any value. Something that would have value would be like a beaver pelt or something, where out west, when America was first being discovered and populated with people and traders, because then you can use a beaver pelt to make a blanket, and it can be something that you have in your house, and can help you survive a winter. It can help you, you know, trap other things, or it's a tool that you can use. And people used to trade by tools and how useful something was. But then the universal acceptance of money comes into play, a nation's money, and then gold too is a international acceptance of wealth. And so that's important to know, that when you're talking about the economy and the strength of a dollar, is, you know, how much can you trust that economy and the trust in society, and that those debts are going to be honored, and that people can save money, and then that's the value of the currency. And both dollars and gold are sort of a fiat currency, that they don't really have any use to them, but it's better than trading in beaver pelts, which are useful, but would be hard to transition a lot with and determine the value of one to the other. So that's kind of how money was created, is to accept that the country started to say, hey, well, these are the value of it. You used to be able to trade it for gold, because gold was universally accepted, as it is today, as wealth. And so that was kind of the underpinnings of currency and money, and then how that can encourage trade. And then people, you know, if I get a bunch of beaver pelts, and then I can turn that into gold, and then I can submit that at the bank, and then somebody else can borrow that. So it's still mine, and somebody else can borrow it, and then that is how money is created, and why there's a lot of American money and U.S. dollars, is because we have a lot of business, and that trust, that the societal trust about debt, has been historically honored, and then we need to keep it that way to keep the value of the dollar. So, and then something a little bit side tangent, as I think, you know, Bitcoin, people say, oh, well, it's not worth anything, it doesn't have anything. But I think that the trust is being put in Bitcoin, where it's already very valuable, and it's going to continue to be valuable. And I think that's the future. That'll be the universal norm, because right now countries like Russia can hoard all the gold, or, you know, that there's a lot more out there than people want to let know, because then if Russia lets everybody know how much gold they have, then it devalues it, because then people are like, oh, well, there's so much of it, then it's not worth that much, and then it reduces the wealth of the nation, if you know, supply and demand. If there's a bunch of gold, and then it's not as valuable. But so I think that is happening with Bitcoin. People are understanding there's value of it, and that will, I think that will replace gold in the future. People will have Bitcoin, and it'll just be universally accepted that that has value. And so right now you can buy things with it, and people have it, and people trade it. That's the future. Computers, and then that's also the value of that is that it's above nations. So they say China currency deflation, or because then they can import or export more, and then it changes their currency's value compared to other nations, and so they can help them with economic things. And Trump is accusing China of doing stuff like that. But Bitcoin is absolved of anything like that, or regulations of the Fed to determine what's the interest rate and how things like that affect the value of the dollar. And what's going to do is that it's the universal human population that's determining the value of Bitcoin, and that as that becomes a more accepted thing and more well known, that the value is going to go up. So I'm looking to invest in Bitcoin. I haven't yet, but I've got some money I need to move around, and then because I think that Bitcoin is going to be a smart investment and is the future of money. So we started out talking about the Jewish people and their debt and saving and how that fits into society. And you can't have politicians talking about relieving all of student debt, because then what about those creditors that have given the students that debt, and then for them to not be honored, then they have no investment to loan people money, and just it's no good. And so when Jewish people come into your neighborhood and they start a business, and then they start borrowing people money, loaning people money rather, that's good, that's how your economy grows and strengthens. So for politicians that say the Jews move into the neighborhood and steal it all is wrong. That if you have that economic activity, that's great. It's good for an economy. It's good that there's people who value those things, and they're making it happen, and they're growing the wealth of the neighborhood is really what's going on. That pirates were around in the 17 and 1800s stealing gold from a city and making that city poor and then moving it elsewhere, but that's not what's happening anymore. That with the interconnected world, that if a Jewish neighborhood starts up in your community, that's good. They're bringing wealth to it, and they're helping people. They're activating economic activity with lending and borrowing and saving. So I just wanted to say that about the value of money in society, and how Jewish people are given a hard time about it and mistaken for stealing it, when in fact they're helping the economic factors grow. And the Rothschilds are a good example of that. Started with the Romans, Rothschilds, and then we got what we have today, and it's good and it's solid, but we don't want to erode it. So that's all I gotta say for Liberty Reawaken. Thanks.